Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, August 28th, 2025. I'm Chris Grodnitsky, Professional Development Coordinator for the Maryland Department of Health Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you today for the Rate Review Advisory Group meeting. If you would like to use closed captioning so you can read what is being said, click this button. Sometimes the transcription is not exact, but it's pretty close. Today's presentation is available in the handout section. Click here where you see the paperclip to download the presentation. If you have a question you would like us to read and answer, click here where you see the question mark to add your question. All attendees are currently in listen-only mode and your mics and cameras are turned off. Before beginning our meeting, we also want to ensure civility for all of our meetings. The free expression of diverse viewpoints is a fundamental value of our group. This freedom carries the responsibility to engage respectfully, which means treating one another with dignity and respect in good faith. Uncivil behavior, disruptive conduct, abusive language, threats, or harassment will not be tolerated and may lead to being excused from the meeting. Thank you for helping to keep this productive and comfortable for everyone. And now I'd like to introduce our Deputy Secretary, Marlena Hutchinson, to begin today's meeting. Good afternoon, Marlena.
For August. Can you all? Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our August Rate Review Advisory Group meeting. This is our sixth and final meeting for this review cycle, and we're looking forward to some healthy discussion today around our rate and policy issues within the purview of the Rate Review Advisory Group. Next slide. Okay, today's agenda has two main focal points. The first is the fiscal year 2028 rate review advisory group rate setting priorities, the general ledger template updates, and then not listed here, we do have a walk-on item in regard to the department's position around the follow-along supports. First and foremost, we're going to set aside 40 minutes for discussion by the RAC members to identify the RAC's FY 2028 rate setting priorities for DDA to consider as a part of the next rate review advisory group's rate cycle, as facilitated by Steve Schramm from Optimus. Then Kristen Deal from Hilltop will provide an update on the GL template data, collection process for the fiscal year 2024 data, and the updates to the FY 2025 data collection tool. Now I'll turn it over to Rob.
Great, thank you, Deputy Secretary Hutchinson. And good afternoon to all of our RAC members and members of the public who are attending today. Members were sent an email with meeting minutes on August 21st. I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes. Would a member like to second? I'll second. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. I will now turn it over to Mr. Steve Schramm from Optimus.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Next slide, please. So in this meeting for the rate setting cycle, typically what we try to do is begin the conversation with the RAG members about what the rate setting priorities that will be under review for the next year's rate setting cycle. So the next year's rate setting cycle will cover fiscal year 28. Remember how far in advance that we have to do this related to the Maryland budget cycle. And what I wanted to do was just put a little context before I open the floor to the RAG members to bring ideas for issues to be discussed during the next rate cycle. So contextually, first, I want to make certain that everyone understands that It has been the goal of the Deputy Secretary to have next year be a rate rebase. So any of the work that we are doing as part of the rate setting cycle will need to be balanced with that ongoing conversation. Our expectation for the rate rebase is that we will try to provide draft information to the RAG showing some of our results. And so we'll need to balance time in meetings to discuss the findings of the rate rebase. So I want to have that be out there. The other thing that I want to make certain that we all understand contextually is we're going to potentially have multiple data sources available to us for that rate rebase. So you'll see we've listed a couple ancillary data sources. Nick has provided us with audited financials. We have mentioned previously going out and looking at 990s that are filed by not-for-profit entities. Any other additional data sources that we might be able to use, we will look at. We also, though, very importantly, will have two sets of data submitted by you, the provider community. So we will have the resubmitted fiscal year 2024 data. And Kristen, when she gets to the GL template update, is going to give a little bit of update on how robust that information is. The reason we're focused on the resubmitted information is you all gave us feedback. Look, this was the first time we submitted the information. We had some questions. So the Hilltop team worked diligently over the course of the last year with the provider community to provide additional guidance and requested that providers resubmit the information. And so we have a pretty robust resubmission, and we're going to use that as part of the rate rebase. And then the last piece that we're going to use as part of the rate rebase is the fiscal year 2025 data, and those are going to be due no later than October 31st of this year. So that's the context. What we have done in the past at this particular meeting is we've just opened it up to the group to say, are there a series of priorities that you want to potentially have considered for the next rate setting cycle? And what I try to do is sit back and document what the group says and as necessary facilitate. So before I get to the rate setting priorities, any questions or comments on the context?
The next year is rebase.
That's the goal.
I would say along with that, we had talked before about shifting the RA cycle a little earlier, so we were done in time for the GL tool. We're gonna have a lot more to do next year. I would ask consideration be more than 6 meetings and more than even the 2 hours potentially. We may need a lot of discussion.
Let me take that into consideration.
So Chris, let me just want to take what you just said and ask for a bit of clarification. When you say more meetings, would you like to have them be earlier in the year or more consistently from, say, March, April, May, June? How, just so as we're under consideration.
I think really, I mean, we've had this cycle spread out over a 6-month time period, and I feel like the last 2 meetings, but the GL tool's got to go out, budget information's got to go out. The last 2 we're kind of already done. We're and I got the last meeting being priority setting.
Yep.
Seems to me to make sense to kind of shift everything a little earlier, to start in November, December, January, wherever the case may be. The last year, so what, February? I think it's February.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if we're going to do more, we're going to get a little earlier. We need to be done by June for Hilltop and for the state for the budgets. Then we need to be done by June.
So you're suggesting starting as early as December?
Whatever we need is my perspective. I mean, we need to keep going around the year for a rebase year. So be it. I'm willing to make that. I don't know, I speak for all the RA members. I'm willing to make that commitment.
Any other suggestions or recommendations from members? that regard?
I think the acknowledgement that as of last meeting, we were told it doesn't matter, it was done, that the budget was done. And so that whatever we have to do to not feel like we're superfluous in meeting and that there be some meaning to it, that whatever the adjustment is, I don't have an opinion about when it starts or how often or whatever, except if anything we talk about after June is going to be irrelevant to next year's process, it doesn't make sense to lead us past June.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just so that we have it for the record, we committed to also looking at how the current cycle aligns with the budget process during the interim time between cycles. So, and we are still committed to do that once this cycle concludes.
Okay. Real quick, let me just, so that we get everyone the opportunity. So Donna, Greg, and Karen, you all are on the phone. Any comments or feedback you want to add to this?
I would agree with Chris. I just feel like we are going to need more time for discussion and for reviewing the data. I don't know how much time that would be, but I do feel like we are going to need more.
Great. Thank you, Donna.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
Yeah, so would I. Thank you.
Okay. Sean is nodding her head here in the room. Actually, I apologize. Karen, you asked that we announce who's in the room. It's difficult for you all to see on the screen.
Yeah.
That's my fault for not doing that. I apologize. Kristen, do you want to start? So we're going to go around the screen. If you're looking at the screen, it's going to be, I believe, left to right.
Kristen Deal, Hilltop.
Chris Park, Somerset Community Services.
Karen Lee.
Nicholas Gabor, DDA Director of Finance.
Robert White, DDA.
No, Hutchinson.
Rhonda Workman, DDA.
Robert Evans, Director of Programs, DDA.
Shauna Mulcahy, York, Frederick County. Alice Middleton, Hilltop.
And Steve Schramm with Optimist. Karen, I apologize for not doing that earlier. My fault. And then we have
Thank you.
Craig Frenzen on the line as well from Optimist. Thank you. Okay, so that was the question I wanted to ask to wrap up on the context. Now let's open the floor to a conversation about priorities for the next rate setting cycle.
So we were informed by the lobbyist for Montgomery County Executive that the geographic differential is not in next year's budget. The whole 10% was gone. So if that ends up being the case, we were told by that person, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, but that's what we were told by them. I think that's
I will set the record straight.
Yeah.
That is a rumor.
Okay.
The department has not opined, said anything in that regard.
Okay.
That is not true.
Okay. So I will go back to them
and tell them that it is not true.
Okay. Because it made me really nervous, and I was thinking we're going to have some talking about that for the RA if that was the case.
That is not true.
Okay. So one question I would have about the because it is a rebase year, the formula for how the state rates are set using the current BLS, which now we're feeling a little bit odd about the BLS and the data, but I wondered if there was going to be any discussion about, and I know Laura shared with us because she had physically a copy of what the rate was. It's 3% of this county and 8% of this county. It's a really convoluted. Will we be looking at the formulas for the feeder BLS, or will that remain stagnant and then the rates will be rebased, or what we're basing them on is the current formula for The brick gonna remain the same? I mean, what are the variables in the rebase?
What's the process look like?
Yeah,
Do you want me to address that? Sure. So the direction that we've received from DDA is to review all of the components of the rate. So from a process perspective, it would be all the categories that make up the BRIC methodology. When you look at all the categories, what you do is you look at all the data sources that come in to each one of the categories. And so the BRIC does vary slightly by the different rates. So we'll look at each one of those sub BRICs and the individual information. We had not anticipated looking at the composition of the BLS. What we had discussed was looking at the categories, the BLS categories that we use to make certain that they are still appropriate. So let me talk, Karen, to differentiate. What you mentioned was the actual math
Mhm.
that makes up the BLS itself, right?
well, that component, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the components. We had not anticipated looking at how the BLS gets compiled, but instead looking at what an individual service category that we would use in the BLS to make certain that they are still accurate and appropriate. Okay?
Ooh, that's big.
Well, the feedback that we've received in the past is those don't change much, but they do have the ability to change. And so we want to just confirm that they're still appropriate. So if we go back and look at the BLS and there's a significant change in how a particular category is, the makeup of a particular category, the description of the job, those kinds of things, then yeah, obviously we need to look at that.
Okay. So that's a pretty expansive project. That alone, even looking to ensure that the BLS category or the position that you're looking at matches what it is the intent of in the, I guess, in the general ledger descriptions. I mean, that's certainly something that we could have ahead of time that we could look at so that we're well prepared as we come into this, because that's pretty significant.
Well, so I know I sound like a broken record on some of these comments, but DDA has always encouraged the RAG members, if there are things that you have specific data on or feedback on, you're more than, they are more than willing to accept information, feedback, written commentary. So if you think there is a particular BLS category that we need to review to determine if it's still appropriate, submit us that information and give us the justification as to why it should be considered.
I'm also thinking in responding to if there's one that you think is significantly different that we don't agree with. So it's kind of both ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have no problem showing the process that we'll go through, but it sounded like you wanted to get started on that process early. And so
I have never reviewed them to the depth in which would allow me to make a decision like that. And if we're going to be asked to make a decision like that, then I just need to do a better job of understanding what each of those positions is, because I have not gone in depth
okay.
with all of them.
Certainly can, again, based on the RAG's request, certainly can provide information as early as possible to help your review.
Steve, what does your cycle look like? When do you plan to start your process? When do you anticipate being completed? Are you done before RAG starts, or are we running in conjunction?
So If you look at the submission due date of October 31st, the submissions for the fiscal year 2025 data probably are not going to be available for us to review until about 90 days at the earliest after that submission. So that doesn't give us that data until the end of January, beginning of February. So if you use past rate setting cycles, we had tried to present preliminary information in the March or April meetings so that we could have conversations about it. It just depends upon the quality of the information and how soon we can get it. But we're still targeting the similar time frame as to what we've done in the past.
And we'll have 24.
Yes,
Feedback.
the resubmitted 24 information.
I mean, 24 is better than we were using, what, 2014?
Yes,
So, I mean, yeah, we've come a long way.
absolutely.
Kind of makes sense to me that if we do start our cycle a little bit earlier, we could have the opportunity for some discussion about some of the process and the things we're running into, what we're maybe looking at data, so that when you're ready to go, we've had the opportunity maybe to discuss the foundation on the BLS piece.
Yeah.
So when we're there, preliminary March, by June, out the door, everybody's happy.
Yeah, so let me use a hypothetical example that I think fits in with what you just talked about, Chris. That would be if the RA members were to work collectively to provide feedback on the BLS categories. You could use the fourth quarter of calendar year 25 to pull that information together. And it would be reasonable for us to consider that information in the first quarter of calendar year 26 as part of the next year's rate setting cycle.
And what we'll do is we'll send to the RIC members a list of the current rates and the BLS code that's driving those rates. And if possible, we'll provide hyperlinks to the description to help assist you all with that process, making recommendations ahead of our cycle.
That would be helpful.
So Brianna, if you could capture that. Brianna is one of our team members, so you'll hear me say her name quite a few times. If you could capture that, please, as a to-do item.
I can also share that as part of the legislatively mandated interested parties advisory group that you may have been hearing about, what they're calling the IPAG. There is an initial meeting, I believe, scheduled the end of October for requirements, and there will be data released in advance of that, and it will include the BLS mapping for specific services. So that will give you a look and some context.
Okay, that'd be great. don't feel like I know those very well.
You know, maybe a foundational change.
Yeah.
Move that needle anywhere.
Yeah, and we don't anticipate moving it. We haven't. So we do rate setting in a number of other states, and I am trying to think the last time we made an adjustment to the categories. It doesn't happen very often, but you always review them just to make certain that nothing material has changed.
Part of the process.
Yep, part of the process. Actually, and to get it, Chris, your question, so you were asking, what is the process? The process is segregating the information as best we can, the data that we have, according to the different rates. So we know that not every provider provides every service and gets reimbursed using every rate. And so what we try to do is organize the data so that we are looking at the appropriate providers and services. And then we look and see if there are, if we have shortages in data, if there are commonalities among the service types. So, you know, the obvious one would be when you're looking at some of the subcategories of the data, You want to look at residential providers. If you need to supplement the different residential rates, you want to focus on similarly situated residential providers, those kinds of things. So from a process perspective, what we're trying to do is organize the data so it is most comparable and can be used to set the rates. Like I said, assuming the provider community is able to provide the information for the fiscal year 25 data no later than October 31st of this year, and the information is of sufficient quality, we typically see it about 90 to 120 days after the due date. And so we think we will be able to provide some preliminary information in a consistent time frame as we have in the past, which is typically the March and April meetings.
Do you anticipate the 25 data going smoother? I mean, and you guys done a great job the last 12 months, kind of getting to the meat and potatoes of it. Are we going to be able to turn 25 around in 3 months? Will we have, and I think you said, we hit the 80% threshold of quality data? Is that how I interpret that?
It's a little nuanced. I will say I'm very optimistic that the submission process and us being able to review the data to meet the timelines for when we'll need it should go much smoother based on the updates we made to the template and standardizing it. And but it's also why it's really important for providers to submit it as soon as they can, so we have that time to engage and get it as clean as we can before sharing it over.
As a trend, did you see? I know we have a lot of very, very small providers, you know, like one group home kind of. Are you seeing a trend in? I think we looked not too long ago, and it's like 40% of providers have more than 200 employees, and 40% have less than 40 employees, and then the rest is. Are you seeing like a trend of who's having the most problem getting it in on a timely manner?
We haven't dug that deep into the data, but we certainly can work with our Optimist partners and potentially do some targeted outreach to those provider groups that were struggling to make sure that they have the resources they need to get it.
I'd imagine that those really small providers don't have access or collaborations. They might not be a part of MAX, they might not be a part of the ARC, they might not have, Interact and the PG Provider Council, that they are the folks that have the least amount of access to colleagues to kind of support them. And
CPA may be doing their
Yeah.
GL tool instead of resources.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
We definitely had a lot of conversations with that provider group, and I'm hopeful that them being able to navigate the 24 and being able to resubmit and have a good understanding of how we were looking to get the data will make the 25 process easier to replicate and to get it for us.
Okay. We still offer the resource that they can reach out to peers for assistance.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's any other way we can actually get them to take advantage? Because we touch base with those providers who have offered that assistance, zero contact. And we're trying to get at why.
Yeah.
Because it's not engaging with the department. It's not as intimidating as engaging with, a big corporate or an accounting firm, but they're not even taking advantage of it here.
Nobody did it early adopters either.
Yeah.
Great.
And even the ones we've had a handful who said, yes, we want that. But even they failed to take it to the next step with the warming and all.
Yeah.
So
I will tell you,
ways to.
She did such a good job in her team that that a lot happened. But I think, Marlena, my concern is that when you have a business infrastructure to do all of this, you understand the importance of it. You've got HR laws that you've got to follow, and you've got minimum. When you're really small like that, and Montgomery County right now has something like 37 providers, And altogether, for our Interact, we probably have at the most 13 that show up to stuff. So it's like, we've got all these providers that are one-offs, they've got one or two. And so I don't even know that they get DDA or know that DDA has webinars. And I mean, I think that a lot of them are very, very small and they don't have infrastructures that rely on those kinds of things. And so we've been trying in Interact to reach out to some of those really, I'm telling you, one group home, one group home or two group homes or, and just their lack of infrastructure and that larger organizations have. So I don't know how to reach, but if we did, we would be doing it.
A little lack of connectivity.
Yeah, absolutely, lack of connectivity.
They're not necessarily connected to Max.
They ran a program at one time and they thought, well, I can just open my own agency, and they don't necessarily have the sophistication or the infrastructure or the leadership to do that. And so if you're looking at 80%, that number, there's a big percentage of them who fall in that could fall off.
Maybe we can build up by way of our provider enrollment efforts, work with Hilltop to do some targeted outreach to those providers. Yeah. To try to at least get them connected with folks. Yeah. Because we have folks who have been on standby wanting to assist.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring us back to the priorities for the next rate cycle. Chris, you talked about moving it forward. That's a process improvement. I think the deputy secretary committed to taking that under consideration. You asked for consideration of additional meetings. Similar comment from the deputy secretary. Karen Lee or Shauna here in the room, any particular services that you want additional focus on for the next rate setting cycle?
All of them.
I don't think we're done talking about employment as an incentivized employment for a state.
Okay.
Certainly, that I think that's another. There's some philosophical parts of not just services, but about the rebasing is, if we're only looking at break even and that kind of thing, just some. It would be helpful, I think, if it could, what is the department's philosophy about the setting of these rates? I think that kind of, what are the values? What are the things that are considered? What are the priorities? I think some of that to kick us off would be really helpful.
Okay. Shauna?
Well, I guess something that we are experiencing, I don't know if everybody is trying the challenge to get some of that one-to-one funding for individuals in either some day services. And I don't know if it's worth considering looking at that there isn't, is it possible to have just a day service rate and then how the provider determines to deliver it? That we're not spending so much energy, and maybe it's just something we're experiencing with the efforts and pushback of trying to secure additional funding to support people maybe with higher needs.
Are you referencing an acuity-based per diem?
Yes.
Yeah, I can assure you, this is Greg, I can assure you that you're not the only one that's experiencing that. In fact, I don't know a provider that provides those supports that's not experiencing that.
So I mentioned to this group maybe 3 meetings ago or earlier, that is one of the things that I'm interested in exploring with the DD provider membership, these rates. I am very much interested in it.
So we can take that back if Rhonda, you want to make note of that, because that's a conversation that we should have with the Waiver Advisory Council. And as we have those discussions and any kind of policy changes or changes to the waiver that have a rate component to that will land back here with the RX.
I just came back from 3 states that cap the amount of hours that a person can have in day hab or community day hab. I'm sure you've heard your colleagues talk about this, and employment is on the outside of that, so they don't count in those numbers. And it's made me think about that when we're either here or in the waiver advisory committee, that we kind of talk very targeted about a specific thing, and we're never really talking about in context of a bigger picture. And so that's something I'm in both of these situations I struggle with a little bit is that the context or the purview that we have is so focused that all of these pieces, as you know, as DDA leadership, it all plays together. If you're going to do this, you have to do this, and then you got to bring this around, and you have this big circle that happens here, and it's very difficult to do kind of a targeted. So I'm wondering if there would be value in a joint meeting of any of these groups that you have, like the waiver advisory committee and this group, and if the sustainability thing comes to play, and say, this is our vision at DDA, so that we have context in which to, we really do want to increase our employment numbers. Well, if I know that, then I'm going to say, then we better focus on employment, because right now it's not a prioritization, because people are either breaking even or losing money on it. And so it doesn't philosophically base itself as a prioritization in that context. And so I'd recommend the waiver be written differently. And I mean, they're all tied together, but it all comes from what DDA's vision for what you're attempting to do moving forward. And so I think something like that would be a really great kickoff for any groups like you have that have a life cycle, so that we are working in tandem and that we are looking at bigger perspectives than just one specific service. That makes sense?
Almost like a cycle mission statement.
Yeah, with the values and right. Because it all feeds together.
Okay, it's helpful. Greg, Karen, Donna, want to give you guys the opportunity to be heard. Greg, you just took it off mute.
Yeah, and I hesitate to bring this up because I don't want it. And if it's outside of the purview of our group, then just push back and I'll shut it down. I think one of the biggest challenges that we're all facing right now, like I sit here right now with 13 people that have been kicked out of the waiver, 13. And then the process to go back, to get them back in the system, all these type of things. And I guess what I'm not super clear on is, and this is an issue that I need to follow up with DDA leadership on, is that the amount of time and energy and effort that is being spent on this, and I know we're not alone because my colleagues are dealing with the same exact thing. This has never happened before in 40 years of being in this system, where just arbitrarily people are dropped from the waiver, and then it's an excruciating amount of work to get them back in. And I don't know if that's something that the waiver advisory group is looking at in terms of how do you make us whole? Like when we have people that are out of the waiver and we're trying to get them back in and we're being told you're not going to get paid for them until they're going to get back in. That's not our focus in this group, but it is affecting this entire system right now. And so you guys just tell me if it's if it's a
Yes.
conversation for another group.
So
But
Greg, to your point, it is a conversation for another group, and it is the department's priority, not just DDA's. So we are focusing on that. As you said, and I will admit, it's not just happening to DDA providers. It's happening to our entire ecosystem. I'm working very closely with the Medicaid leadership and the secretary on this. So while it's not for this group, and it's outside of our group's context, I do want to let you know that it is a priority and it is something that the department is actively working on, and we'll have some updates at the Waiver Advisory Council.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
I
Greg.
just want to add to what Karen was suggesting too, is that if we truly believe in employment first and we want to be an employment first state, we have got to figure out a way to incent that service. And right now it is not incented. And so I just want to add my voice to that conversation as well.
Yeah, this
I
is
think
Donna.
that's, thank you, Donna.
Just, yeah, piggybacking on what Greg said, and I know Marlena, you said it is, it will go to the other group in terms of the waiver, but ditto, we're all experiencing that, and it's tremendous dollars in the wait, and or people not being able to attend services because they're not authorized for the service, quite frankly. Once the funding stops, the service stops. The other piece that piggybacks with that, which is not for this group, but part of the other group, which does affect overall funding and services, is the dedicated hours. The number of times PCPs have to go back. It's just a delay, and providers are still putting out the funds for those services. I know they are, we are. So that I know is for another group, but overall it affects what we're paying the rate. So I just wanted to add that in. And then the employment services is definitely a service that we need to look back at.
Okay. So I feel.
This is
Go ahead,
Karen.
Karen.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody else has said. I really want to add my 2 cents to what Karen Lee was saying about the vision for the people, the constituents of these services. What is that vision, and how do we holistically look at that and try to move away from services not needing to be looked at because we're not losing money on it? Doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't need to be looked at if we're really looking at what is the vision for folks and how do we want to meet the needs of all of the constituents that are receiving services. How do we need to look at those services? The other piece that I just was at a conference and hearing so much about technology, and I know that we're saying that we are a technology first state, but really trying to buckle down on how technology is going to impact service delivery and how we support people for the future.
It is very hard to get technology funded.
Well, but
it's as difficult as the one-on-one stuff right now.
Okay. I do feel I'm compelled to make a comment, an observation, not trying to convince you all one way or another, just to mention it, that part of the budget challenge that the state is currently experiencing has to do with the use of incentives in rates and it becoming an equity issue. That there are what appears to be pockets of providers taking advantage of services that we've tried to incentivize. And so as we think about payment and rate policy going forward, we'll need to think about what are we incentivizing and how do we make certain that it can be controlled. Because we have concerns raised that we have now equity issues where we incentivize certain services and people have taken advantage of that. So as a group, the RAG, we should be thinking about how payment and rate policy can develop appropriate incentives.
For example, what you're talking about?
Yeah, can I ask a question about that, please?
Sure.
Steve, my question on that is, well, maybe, I'm not sure it's a question, but there's a question in here somewhere. So I totally understand what you're saying, but it's hard for me as a member of this group to get my head around that without you or somebody at some point, and I'm not looking for, providers to be thrown under the bus here, but to have a true context of what you're talking about in terms of what type of incentives and kind of the perception of where or how that's being abused. Because what I don't want to see us do, back to Karen Gilchrist's point is, so I would hate to see us with technology disincent something that is actually going to save us a lot of money in the long run, because we haven't been able to figure out how to make that happen yet. So I don't know. Today, obviously with this packed agenda, you're not going to have time, but I would love for you to put a little bit of more meat on the bones of that comment you just made about the perceived inequities and what those services are, because I don't feel like to me that feels like you have that information and I might have to make some decisions about that, but I don't understand really what you're talking about with that. So if that's a future conversation to help us understand how that's happening without getting into all the specifics of the ones that you feel may be abusing it, I think that context would be very helpful for me as a RAG member.
Sure, we're very comfortable providing that's part of the analytics. When I talked about the context, the ancillary data sources, part of the additional data analyses that we're doing is we're looking at the ratio of hours for individuals used. We're looking at the increase in dedicated hours versus shared hours and comparing that to the FTE count, and what we're seeing are mismatches. The preliminary data are showing that there are not additional FTEs to support the additional billings. So what we can do in further conversation, I think it's a very reasonable request. I see the deputy secretary nodding her head saying, yeah, we'll provide information around that. Because what you're seeing is tremendous growth in total build, but what you're not seeing are commensurate growth in staffing or staffing patterns. And so we're trying to figure out what's driving that.
We'll also be looking at the data a number of ways. One is by way of dynamic scoring, looking at the amount of investments that we're making in the system by way of services and so forth, how that compares to a person's HRST score, how it compares to their CIS score and so forth. And then what are their outcomes, right? So as we are looking at all of this, the entire ecosystem will be sharing this information.
Are you considering value-based payments?
We are just beginning to look at some things. Yes. We're just beginning to look at some things. We will be sharing that information and data with you all.
Well, that ties into your,
about, sorry, Greg. Steve
I was going to
talked
say that
about,
ties into your interest in looking at acuity-based rates. I mean, I think that's the natural overflow of that conversation. So very supportive of that.
and Steve talked about how equity is being impacted. I cannot stress more our concern around sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the group that we will have helping us look at the entire ecosystem as a whole is specifically called the Maryland IDD Sustainability and Equity Collaborative. We have to figure this out across the board. And as we're looking at data, one example, looking at the entire ecosystem, it has to also happen outside of DDA. So when we're talking about stacking, blending, grading, sequencing services and so forth, how our partner agencies play into that. So we're looking at Medicaid data. We're looking at education data, things that should be happening under those authorities that complement the waiver.
Housing, transportation.
So as we're
labor.
talking about equity and sustainability, it's our entire ecosystem. All state partner agencies.
Yeah. So I think, Steve, I would say it's hard to answer your question about what to focus on until we have an opportunity to kind of hear from DDA about what the vision for going forward is, because then that would help us to get,
To hone it in.
that you agree?
You guys okay if I push back on that? I'm just gonna say, I hear what you're saying, but the challenge that I have is, what more are you asking the deputy secretary to tell you? So that's the piece that, like, there are, Chris, I think you mentioned, a mission statement and value statements, those kind of things. Those exist. Let's take this, I gotta go one level deeper on that. Help me with that.
So I would say, as I said, in 3 states I just left.
Yep.
They have these caps on how many hours people get day have, and there's a lot of reasons they do that. They cap services. So they say you cannot get a residential service that is so uploaded with dedicated hours or whatever that each state calls it.
Yep.
If it's not equitable with a person living by themselves. Like, so 4 people living together, they all 4 have all of these different additional supports, one-on-one supports in there. And now they would be cheaper if they lived alone and had 24/7 of one-on-one than living in this place. And so there's states have these things built into their rate system and into their waiver system. It is both a rate and a waiver issue. It's not one alone. Or the idea that technology is always available and easy to access so that people can live more independently and we are not reliant on staff, and we're using the community life engagement framework as a way of a fidelity tool for looking at our PCPs. We have fidelity processes in our discovery. We have those kinds of things. When I am with other states and I say, how'd you get to this rate? How did you get to this formation? They say, oh, because it's a value of ours that we do X, Y, Z. And everybody in the state can verbalize that. That I don't see at this point in Maryland. So it's difficult to make a decision or make a recommendation when it might be very different. And I appreciate DDA's openness and willingness to say, whatever you want, tell us, we'll have a discussion about it. But when leadership drives some of that information, it helps us to frame what it is that we should focus on.
So let me, I hear what you're saying. So you gave a very specific tactic, which was a limit, and you said that tactic was driven by a guiding principle.
Yes.
And the guiding principle, you tell me the guiding principle, because I'm going to misstate it. So tell me the guiding principle that caused that tactic.
Right. So we, as the state that has this cap, says that we believe people should have choice and control where they live and who they live with.
Okay, stop.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Love that. So now I'm going to go to Rhonda and I'm going to say, Rhonda, does DDA have guiding principles like that they've communicated to the community?
I would say yes.
Okay, so where the only reason I'm bringing this up is a lot of times we in this group have begun talking at cross purposes, because I don't think we're hitting the same level of detail in what we're asking for. And I think that's a shortcoming of me as a facilitator. I haven't stopped the conversation and said, tell me exactly what would be helpful. So, Karen Lee, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I think you're a pretty strong person. You won't mind it. Okay? Suspend reality for a second. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And Deputy Secretary, do not take any of this personal. Put yourself in her shoes. What would be a guiding principle that you would like to hear come out of her mouth? Because that's what I'm asking for. I want to get us so that we're not talking like this. I want to get us to where we're more like this.
I think that, well, let's just use that one specific, we want people to have choice and control where they live, and they may choose to live on their own, right? So that might be something that Rhonda believes is clear, but when you try to put one of those budgets through at a regional office, it ain't happening. So it might be something that is the deputy secretary believes in. It might be something that they've written in the waiver, but it's not something that we're able to get through the system. And so the values of what we're trying to do are inconsistent.
All right, so let me, and I'm going to push hard on this one because I like where we're going. I think we're making progress. I think what you've just said is you're unclear about the tactics, and you might be willing to suspend reality for a second and say the principles exist, but the operational guidance or operationalization of it doesn't exist. So maybe it's not a disconnect of, you're not asking for guiding principles. What you're asking for is the operational guidance. Maybe that gets us closer to knowing what you're asking for.
Right.
Do you see what I'm trying to do? I want to
let me back up for a second. Let me back up for a second.
Yeah.
So we know that that our services have to start with a solid foundation of a good plan.
Yep.
We are underpaying the case management system to the extent that their turnover is so high, we cannot get a decent plan out of them, and the training is so difficult. If it's really a value, if these plans are really a value, which I think that you would see the work that's gone into it in Maryland, they're decent looking frameworks. The plans are not, the actual plans are not very good, but the framework for the plan is very good. So I would say the philosophy of the department is, yes, indeed, that we believe that the plan should drive the service. But yet the people who are responsible for helping people to create those plans, there's too many of them on their caseload, the funding is not. We've got to put our money where our mouth is. If that's really the basis of high quality services, and DDA believes that, then let's put our money where our mouth is so that we can get decent plans for people that are done in a timely manner, that really reflect them and give them the caseload numbers. That's how it all ties together. So I would say, I don't in isolation want to say, let's look at the CCS rates. Well, there's a reason I'm saying that. I'm saying that because if we want to have high quality plans, we need to have highly skilled people writing those plans and coordinating them and facilitating them. And so therefore, and we need to know that there's the documentation requirement and the oversight and the training, and they have the bandwidth to do it. It all has to come together when you're talking about a system that has an infrastructure that's supporting 23,000 people right now.
Yep.
And they have to tie.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think part of the challenge that we're going to face is we're in a little bit of a chicken versus the egg dilemma right now. And I think what you're, I would turn the tables to what you just said. And what I would say to you is, it would be helpful if you could point out the operational gaps that you just did. As you and I had this conversation, you discussed tactics, and at first we were talking about getting a policy statement. And then we said, you know what, maybe it's not really policy statement. Maybe it's operational direction. And then now you've added maybe another layer above it, which is like strategic investment perspective, right? You're trying to say.
I think it's more of a wagon wheel than a hierarchy.
Okay.
Right? I think that all of those components are equal in it. I think the value, the mission, the coming out and saying it, and how it's written in the waiver, and how it's implemented in policy, and how it's funded. It shows the infrastructure of any organization. Any of us who've run companies before, organizations, know. Look where all your money is spent. That's where it is that your priority.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but where I'm pushing back is you don't want mission level statements from DDA. What you are talking about is something at a more granular level, and I'm trying to figure out what that granular level.
Well, how does it all fit together, though? I think that's important. That's what I got to push back on. That's not the purview of the RA, right? but we can't make decisions unless we have that information.
But that's the whole chicken and the egg. That's why I want to have this conversation. I think this is really valuable for us to hash this out, right? We got to figure out what the role of the RAG is within that larger ecosystem. And I can't set I can't set rates without direction of knowing where the gaps are. And so I'm trying to figure out where the biggest gaps are. And what you're trying to figure out is how should you be, I think, and I apologize if I misstate this, I think what you're trying to figure out is how do you allocate your resources so it matches up with DDA's priorities? And that's separate from
Oh,
rate
no,
setting.
I don't, no, that's.
Not, okay, I said it wrong? That's, I'm
Yeah.
more than willing to.
No, I allocate my resources as an organization according to what the people is that we provide services. DDA is not my only funder.
I understand it.
Yeah, that I don't do with DDA, right? I do the right thing, I do best practice, and then I try to find the funding for it. Some of it comes from DDA, some of it does not come from DDA. So
That's fine.
yeah.
All right. So we don't have other than the comment about employment services in general.
I would say CCS is in that manner. If
Okay.
the basis of the service that we're supposed to be providing comes from a well-developed plan by a highly skilled person, I think we have to look at those rates or why it is that that's not happening.
Okay. I am trying to get us so that what you all are asking for is something that DDA can deliver and that it's useful and helpful.
And I just have a follow-up question with the CCS one. Is that where you were going with the VBP, the value-based purchase?
Not as much as I just came back from a 2-day think tank in Denver on value-based payments with like Lisa Mills, who did with this group of people that are all talking about managed care, value-based payments. And if you're an organization that happens to be producing the outcomes, you should be paid more than organizations that are just doing the baseline.
Yeah, we do it
Yeah.
in the institutional side. It's called pay for performance.
Yeah.
I was interested in knowing if you were talking
Yeah.
about a particular service.
No,
or
well,
across
we talked about it in terms of employment, but I've seen it in a lot of different services. Yeah. And that's a whole nother funding system, right? That's
Yes.
not even,
Yes.
yeah.
All right. I'm going to open it to Donna, Greg, and I can't see if Karen is on and just not on camera. Donna, any additional comments?
No, other than it seems like, rightfully so, our list is getting a little bit longer, which warrants even more time to have to be able to really look into these things. But I think, in terms of the big picture, it's just such an important part, particularly what Karen is asking for. It's like that, re-looking at that foundation.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you just had an awful lot of conversation around that. And so now it's a matter of where we really do take that. And at the same time, not wanting anything to truly bog down what we have to do with our charge with the rates.
Yep. Helpful feedback. Greg, I'm going to toss it to you.
Not a whole lot to add there. I thought that was a good conversation. I think that the overall tone, I think, is that vision without resource and planning is not vision; it's hallucinating. And the question is, on a practical basis, if we value certain things in our system, and as we attempt to provide those things, we just run into barrier after barrier after barrier, then it makes people start questioning, well, if that's valued, then why is it, if employment is valued, Why is it so hard to get the support necessary to help people get to work? That's just one small example. And I know we're going to look at that. But I
Yep.
think the idea there too is that, and I like this conversation because it has to be a collaborative conversation. You know, DDA can't just snap their fingers and fix this, right? This is
Yes.
something that we are partners in, and we have to figure out in a system that has a huge amount of resources allocated to it. Are we using those resources in a way that best prioritize what our true values as a system are? And I think that, you know, then the RRAG wraps around that to figure out how do you make it work in terms of billable services and supports. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's obvious. It's a big charge, but it's a huge system. And huge
So,
systems tend to spin out of control in certain places, and that affects the efficiency of those systems. And so I'm a big fan of additional dialogue and trying to actually then get down to the nitty gritty and say, well, let's talk about how this practically would work for somebody receiving this service in the state of Maryland at this resource level. What does that look like for them?
yep. I, I, I am a big fan of trying to match the operational guidance with the practical experience. So I appreciate that comment. Karen Adams Gilchrist.
Well, not really any additional things to add. I agree 100% with the conversation. And like Greg said, I love the conversation. And I 100% believe that DDA does have a value system, and they have a vision of what they want the service system to look like. But when you get ready to operationalize a flexible, person driven system is what we believe. When you get ready to operationalize that, it is difficult because of the constraints of the system.
Okay,
And so yeah, this is a great conversation, and these are the things that we need to look at if we really want to serve people the way that we want to serve them, based on our values, based on our vision.
got it. Uh,
Big list.
it's a big list. So the takeaway from this conversation is a further follow-up conversation with DDA to talk about the connection between principles, values, operational guidance, and tactics. So I know that's a really global, overarching conversation, but it has operational subcomponents that we can talk about. I need to move us along on the agenda.
Can I just one more
Yep.
thing real quick? Next year being a rebase year, to me, part of it is we're learning that process first time through.
Yeah.
That's the part for me next year. So when we're looking at all of it. So we're going to be looking at file long. We're looking at some of those pieces. When do we and where do we dive down? To me, this is the year, and you've already made the commitment on acuity to look acuity, utilization, looking at those fundamental underlying pieces, the BLS. When we go through the rebase for years, we've got to look at the base, the structure. We have all those pieces. We have opportunity to dive into something at a deeper level. But I think next year we're going to be pretty well busy looking at the entire process.
I think we are, because, Chris, I love the caution that you're throwing in there, because practically speaking, mathematically, there is zero chance that there's not going to be a handful of rates that are going to need to change dramatically. And that presents operational challenges for the provider community, right? And so your caution about we have our plate full with just the rate setting is a valid one.
I mean, look, you come back after analysis on a particular rate, let's just say foul and you're saying we're recommending going the other direction. God, I hope not.
Yeah.
Completely contradictory to Plymouth first.
Yeah.
Then we dive down into that conversation. We won't know until you get there.
Yeah.
On those pieces of it.
And we won't get there for a little bit. All right. I apologize for
I have one thing.
pushing.
Stephen, I know we have a long list of things. Most of them are related to connecting some dots, which I think would be an overlay, not just over the RAC, but the WAC, and as well as the MidSec. But what if you could recap what we captured as far as rate priorities for 27 to make sure we captured all of those.
So, the employment services rate was brought up initially by Karen Lee, but seconded by pretty much everyone. Shauna asked about the day services, and the deputy secretary actually interjected in that. And then CCS rates were specifically forwarded.
The one was flagged by Greg, not sure if it was around an acuity-based type of.
That was Shauna's.
Oh,
Yeah, Greg.
Okay.
That he said it was the same.
Yeah,
Okay.
Greg seconded that comment. Second and third and fourth.
And then also the utilization.
I'm willing to take a look at utilization as well too. You're talking about day had certainly a factor
Yeah.
there.
Yep. Okay.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Okay. Kristen.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Okay. So we wanted to take the opportunity to, can we go back to the 24 slide? Slide 13, thank you. Just wanted to take the opportunity to give a quick update and talk through some of the preliminary data that we saw with our 2024 general ledger templates. We've been talking all cycle about the efforts to reach out to providers, engage them, getting all their feedback, as well as have them resubmit templates, based on the discussion so that we could get the cleanest data set we could as our benchmark year. And so when we look at the total, provider submissions that were required, we got 248 out of the 298 providers. To date, we have actually engaged and sent feedback to all of the submissions that we've received. The number of resubmissions that came back to us following that targeted technical assistance was 178. And so if you take the 178 out of the total required submissions, we're at about a 59% rate of required providers to submit with our data set. And then as Chris mentioned earlier, with the 80% there, I just want to clarify that when we take the 59% of the providers who were required to submit and then further look at the quality of that data, it is 80% of that subset of data that is usable in terms of digging in deeper. And so really when we get to the number of our, resubmissions out of the resubmissions with high quality data out of the total providers who are required to submit, we're at a 47% submission rate, or 47% of the providers who are required to submit in 24, we received data from and we believe that it is usable.
Which is a dramatic improvement from what we've had in the past. And we think we're going to get further improvements in fiscal year 25. So we're happy.
Yes. Yes.
Say that one more time. To me, the question still to me is, what's the best data set? Is it, and to Karen's point earlier, 40% are large and complex, and 40% are struggling to even get you data, and they got one group home. How do we plan on moving forward? Because 80% is always going to be the challenge. We can hang our hat on all we want, but like next year we're rebasing. We're going to have 80%.
We're not going to have 80%.
Okay.
But we're going to rebase.
Okay, so then why not the same position when we're talking about individual service? If we have now some decent quality data, we got 80% of the 60% essentially. Can we use that going forward rather than keep saying we don't have 80%? You're going to get stuck doing it next year, whether you're going to or not, with what you got. So
we're part of the issue, I think, is we're conflating the 80% has been our goal because we're not doing population health rates. We're doing individual provider level rates. So there's so much variability in those rates that we need to have about 80%. So we make certain that we get representative of all of the providers, like Karen Lee is saying. the really small ones, the mid-sized ones, and the large ones. So it's not as if we're saying we're not going to set rates if we don't get to 80%. We're going to do the rebates next year. But if DDA comes out and says that's not a requirement, providers are going to say, I'm not submitting.
I don't
We
know
know
about
it.
that piece of it. I'm talking about our individual discussions, like when we were diving down into follow along, or when we were looking at utilization. The answer was we didn't have 80% to look at.
Okay, what we said was we do not have compelling information from you all.
Quality data.
Yes, okay. And so again, if there were compelling quality data to make a change and follow along supports, we would have recommended it. And I know this is unpopular with this group, but I have no problem saying it again. There was not enough compelling quality data to make a change to the follow along supports rates.
Meaning that the department's priority of employment first didn't impact your data.
Now you're back to the value issue.
Yeah. I am unwilling to talk about the department's priorities, but what I'm going to say is, from a rate setting perspective, and us being of the position that we're going to do a data driven rate setting, no.
So that's why where they're not coming together for us is you're looking at a different miles or a threshold than what an employment first or technology first or person first system would look like.
And I'm going to respectfully disagree. And here's what I'll say. And I would appreciate you giving me your feedback on my take. Just because a state makes something a priority doesn't mean that it throws out its rate setting principles. And you cannot set rates solely because you've made a service a priority. Otherwise, you end up in situations where you provide inappropriate incentives without sufficient guidance or control over the rates. And so I would disagree. They are not mutually exclusive.
So
certainly interrelated.
Yeah, I would just add though that even though we didn't have the level of quality data we needed to inform a change to the rate, we still gleaned a lot of information from the discussion we had that we took back that will inform changes from an operation perspective, policy decisions, it flagged additional opportunities for education and things like that. And so we are taking it seriously. We are an employment first state. We just lacked the level of quality data needed to make an actual change to the rate. But we're doing some of these other things that will hopefully create efficiencies within the system and reduce provider administrative burden as well. And we'll continue to have those conversations in other forums as well as we move towards that goal.
And see that it's, again, priority for
I would just still encourage us to analyze that quality data benchmark of 80%. I mean, I got into the goal, but if you take Karen's perspective earlier when you start to do a bell graph on the size of the providers and services, if you had 80% from the top half, no, you're not going to cover every situation. But if the bottom half can't give us the quality data because limitations that they have, why shut it down? If 80% of the providers are affected by it. And again, we're saying one of my overall principle is we don't have the data to adjust one particular rate, but the same set of data next year, we're using the rebase all of it.
It's not the same set of data. So we don't currently have the 990s. We don't currently have the audited financials. We do have the fiscal year 24 resubmitted information, but we just have that now. I didn't have that 6 months ago in order to do the rates. So I get what you're saying, but I want to make certain that we're not mixing time periods, right? We couldn't do it because we didn't have the information, and the information we have now is still not adequate to do a rebase. By the time we get there, it will have to be adequate, and we'll figure out how to make it adequate by ancillary data sources. We don't have a choice.
We've got access to the data sources, both of them. I mean, financials we've turned in for years. I know we stopped with this particular issue. Not even available online.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when we get there, when we do the rebase, what you have at that point in time that you consider quality data may need to be our benchmark moving forward for other items.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be. If we're willing to use it for rate rebase, yes.
My point.
Yeah.
But if you get it 60 and it's 60, you're happy with 60, then 60 is the new norm. I'm not saying it should be 60. It should be
No.
Not advocating 60.
And I know this is an interesting philosophical debate, but it does not become the new norm. It is going to be necessity is the mother of invention. So we have a requirement to rebase, and we will rebase. But that's not going to be the ceiling that we use, nor the floor that we use going forward. We will improve the data every year. Otherwise, we are not going to meet our federal partners' requirements. So I want to make certain we're all on the same page.
So 10 years from now, we're talking about 90% quality data, okay? We're not there.
Absolutely. Kristen, sorry.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I think if we look like really big picture, we did get an 85% response rate in fiscal 24, but we're at about a 47%, usability rate for the data that we got. So that threshold high gets us the highest level that we can. On some preliminary looking at the sort of representative of that data, of the submissions that we received and are usable, it represents about 69% of the people served in the system and about 58% of the revenue. And so then to Karen's point, we could dig deeper into like the number of staff, the size of the agencies to see how it plays out, further down into those details. Just some quick facts of the usable data, that we received, it represented a total of, providers reporting across 784 total different services. So 29% of those were residential services, 41% were meaningful day services, 30% fell in the support services area, and the average number of services reported by provider was about 4.5 services. We did a quick look at the wage data and determining like the representativeness and the usability of the data received. And so of those resubmissions, about 74% of the providers had wage datable that appeared reasonable based on the wages that were reported, the hours, expenditures, and digging a little bit deeper into that. And so we will continue to look at that 24 data set we received. It will be kind of our benchmark as we move forward and start getting the 25 data. Next slide, please.
Kristen, would you be willing to share those stats with me?
Sure. I can make sure they get into the minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yep. And so moving forward to 25, we are excited that the new template really is a representation of this year-long engagement we've had with the providers, all the feedback that we received, technical assistance requests. And so some of the key pieces to the tool that were available when we released the draft back in June was just clarifying language to the provider tab and the DSP wages and staffing patterns. This was a consistent discussion topic with the providers and really was added to the template based on input from this group, right? We wanted to look at what does the turnover look like? What are the different categories of DSPs and wages that they were receiving? And so we're, collecting that data now and have had the clarifying language. So we're hopeful that this will look really great for 25. When we were looking at the costs that were at the costs and the descriptions in each of the cost categories, we transitioned to drop downs this year to standardize that. We reviewed and kind of analyzed all of the different descriptions that we were seeing across the cost categories. And this was also a major area where we went back to verify with providers, because if the description wasn't clear or if it was vague enough for us not to be able to confirm that it was in the right category. We had lots of discussions back and forth. And so we've created some standardized drop downs. So as providers are reporting, it's really clear what should go where. And then it eliminates that need for us to go back and forth with the providers to clarify we have the right costs in the right categories. And then we, as part of the tool and the ability to create the drop downs and the customizability to just have the tabs for the services that you provide in the region and the billing systems that your provider organization distinctly uses, we added up the macros into the Excel template. And so the final version that was released does address some of the security integrity concerns that we received. It has a certified Excel certificate in the template to ensure that when you employ those functionality, it doesn't create any security concerns for your organization. Next slide, please. And so here is just links to where the template and all the resources are available online. Again, our email address, I think everybody's got it saved, but please feel free to reach out to us anytime. We have been talking about the due date for the template being no later than October 31st, 2025. As Steve has mentioned, we will need some time with the data to be able to share those key points as we kick off the next rate cycle. And so we're hopeful that as providers have that data available, they will submit it. This will give us more time to engage with them and answer questions or clarifications as needed. And also encourage providers to reach out to us sooner rather than later so we can help provide the technical assistance needed to get those templates submitted. And we also had a plug earlier, but the peer-to-peer assistance continues to be available. We have heard and made some connections. And so we would be happy to assist with that if any providers want to get connected. Feel free to send us an email and we can make that happen.
Thank you for the date change. September 3rd. Was that a provider request you heard over and over, or was it just?
It's our deputy secretary wanting to give folks additional time because there was a delay in pushing it out to incorporate some of the enhancements in the security certificate mentioned by Kristen. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, Karen, for recognizing the hard work of Kristen and the LTAP team. And Chris, you and both Rick mentioned partnership quite a few times. And this was truly a partnership to get us to what we feel comfortable calling a provider-informed general ledger template. There were no material changes from the draft that was sent out in 25. But I think, some of the additional bells and whistles that we were able to add based on that feedback will hopefully lead to a more efficient
Drop downs are a
experience.
game changer for being able to sort for your team. That should be a game changer for you.
Now, the one caveat, not really a caveat, with the extension is if you have it ready to go before October 31st, get it over to us.
Yeah. I appreciate the extension. We do our audit late because we don't give it to our board until December. So we don't want to send you something that is not consistent with the audit. So I think that's a fairer date for people who have late audits.
Yeah, that was
And
ditto for
remember-
us too. Definitely,
Yeah.
we definitely appreciated that extension.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Robert, I can turn it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Slide 16, please. So I mentioned this earlier during the last cycle. We got a request to take a look at the rate cycle and how that kind of overlays with the budget process, and that's something we're committed to do at the end of this cycle. And so we will continue to look at that. And we also want to thank you all for all of your thoughtful comments related to that as well. And now we are ready to move on to open discussion, add-on items, and then progress to public comments time permitting. I know the one item that our deputy secretary went to discuss was the RM letter.
Mhm.
So we can go ahead and I'll turn it over to you.
So I want to thank the group, the RA membership, again, for the thoughtful letter that you sent to my attention. We have, I know we've discussed the RA membership's concerns around the employment services, or we've talked a bit about it today. And I do want you to know that employment services remain departments. I'm hearing today again that we want to consider it as an ongoing conversation for the next rate review cycle. I will be following up with you all in writing in that letter, just so that you have that for your records. But can't stress more how important this partnership is to us. The meaningful engagement, we're having very hard conversations, as well we should. But we cannot do this without you all, and I want you to know that we appreciate everything that you're bringing to the table, everything, holding us accountable as well. You should. So you'll have a written response in the very near future to the letter. And so if there's anything else that you would like to bring up in regard to your concerns about the employment services that we haven't discussed earlier in today's conversation, all ears. Yeah.
I would say the one thing that we have to look at in terms of it being a priority to the, and I know we've made some changes to the waiver for that, for some of those services, and I think, my comments were, I thought they were good. I thought they were good changes. Is when you start to look at our numbers around employment and our data collection system, which is one of the best in the country, really, you'll see that employment and competitive integrated employment is not growing. And so that's the challenge for me about saying we're not going to invest more in it, is the numbers are, it's pittance. The other piece is something that I sent down to the waiver advisory committee is we know that when people choose self-direction, or their family chooses self-direction, that the likelihood that they will be in an employment service goes down by about 54%. That's one of the reasons why the technical guidance came out, was because the NCI data shows that people who self-direct are, it's like 48% less likely to take employment as a service. And so as we see a rise in people doing self-direction, we're seeing a decrease in people choosing employment, or people maybe believing that they can be employed. And in an employment first state, of course, we believe that everybody who wants to work can work, right? We just have to provide the supports. So I think that our data does not support that it's a priority to DDA. And that if it is a priority, that the incentives related to it would show up not only in financials, that's only a small part of the wagon wheel, it would show up in our biannual data that you do, or twice a year. And it's not showing up there in our numbers, and it's not showing up in our transitioning youth, and it's not showing up in those places. And so I think that there's more than just the financial data to look at in terms of, is it a priority, and how is that being carried out?
It's great feedback. I'd like to go back and review that data by model as well.
Mm-hmm. If you get that raw data, it is so well done. You can sort. You can see regions in place. I mean, it's really well done. That data collection tool, and they'll give you the raw data. Shepherd will give you the raw data.
Thank you. Any of the feedback around employment services for our organization?
Hey, do we, how are we for time? We're
2:40, I think you have time for questions from the public.
Any other, so we're moving on from the RRAG letter and the anticipated response in writing.
Thank you for that.
Are there any other, opening the floor to other members of the RRAG for member discussion? Items for discussion, multiple items before we move along to public comment.
It's a big to-do list.
That's exciting.
Perfect timing with our FY 2026 strategic plan. So Christina, I think it's ready to move on to public comment. So we can take a look at the chat or the questions, as well as open the mic for anyone who wants to raise their hand to provide feedback.
Alrighty.
It's the Thursday before Labor Day. Everybody's already gone.
I have my glasses on. It looks like there's 4 hands. Is that correct?
How can you see
How do you see that?
Oh.
Oh,
right.
I'm looking down at the
Everyone's housekeeping item that I missed.
I'm sorry, I'm waiting on Eric to help unmute people, so hang on 1 second.
So we have Andy who has their hand raised. Their mic has been
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Can
can
you
hear
hear
you.
me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry, this is Andy Culp with the Arc Maryland. It's good to see everybody. I wanted to go back to something that somebody said. I think Greg, it might have been you, about this group. Would it be appropriate for this group to take up a discussion about the uncompensated care with people falling out of the waiver, losing their waiver determination, and there being a gap in payment to the providers? And I think I think the answer was no, that's not for this group, but actually, it might be, because hospitals get uncompensated care factor in their rates for uninsured people who are served. So I just wanted to kind of see if you would be open to revisiting that as a possibility for the RREG.
Uninsured factor, so the closure factor.
I keep
Well,
back.
yeah.
Traditionally, fee-for-service rates are not allowed to include dollars for services not rendered. You need to talk with CMS about how you would recapture that, because the particular issue question is waiver eligibility, and they're not going to do federal match for an individual for a time period that they don't see them as being waiver eligible.
Just sure I thought, I hope you realize this issue was also tied to the CCSs and challenges.
Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
rates there. So I mean, it's, yeah.
It is good feedback on a need for better system coordination.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Andy.
Next person we have is Paulette. Mike.
Paulette, your mic should have been
All
unmuted,
right,
so.
thank you. It takes a minute for that unmute to reach us. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to comment. I think this has been a very informative meeting for a family member that self-directs under the Maryland system. I have two comments. Number one, Marlena, I really appreciated your comments in regard to how DDA is working to try to help those of us that have been uh, pushed out or somehow or another find ourselves not under the waiver. And so I appreciate that you're really looking into that, and that is a priority because it is happening to a lot of people, whether they're in the provider system or whether they are self-directing. So I just wanted to thank you for that and to encourage you and your staff to work hard to see how you can get those of us who have individuals that are eligible, but because of paperwork or system problems, have not been able to um, uh, be in the waiver. And then my second comment is and how that impacts us and our perception of the system and that the system is working for us. So that would really help out. And then the second comment is um, in regards to employment services. And I'm not privy to a lot of the information that precipitated that comment that of the comparison that when going into self-direction, use of employment services may drop, but that does not mean that self-directed teams are not working toward self-employment and have not found alternative ways to provide our individuals with employment. With employment. So there are many of us who self-direct, who who get our individuals employed. So I would just question that in your data that you're not just solely looking at whether or not because we are able to use other resources to seek employment for our individuals. So has or is there and I'm not asking you to answer this now, but is there a way to add to your data points, not only that in self-direction, we may not, for an sundry of reasons, be using that employment service. However, we may be able to be accomplishing employment in alternative ways. And so therefore to collect data that is actually looking at whether or not our individuals are employed or whether or not our individuals are working on skills so that they will be able to be employed, however, are working in the community in a volunteer capacity, because that is an alternative. So I just wanted to make that comment in regards to that. Thank you very much.
Can I comment on that or not?
Thank you, Paulette.
Right. Next person we have is Irene. Irene, are you there?
Okay, now connected. Hi, how is everyone? This is Irene Swada. I'm one of the commissioners on the Department of Disabilities. I'm also a business owner and support people with developmental disabilities and self-directing their services. So I actually one of my the top question that I had was about the respite rates. If you can really take a look at that, I saw that the daily rate is actually much lower in comparison to the hourly rate. There have been a few situations over the last 10 years or so that I've been helping people in self-directions where we've had to use emergency respite. Um, and primarily a lot of the providers, they don't want to take someone who is self-directing into respite because the rate has been so low, or they have it in their mind that it's a step towards full residential community living situation. So, we want to have that resource available to people without feeling pigeonholed and without putting the provider at a disadvantage. So I'm hoping that this group will look at that closer. So the hourly rate for a DDA provider is 38.44, but if you take the daily rate of like 520 something, it comes out to 22.40 an hour. So that is that point. The other thing is it did, Karen, I totally understand what you mean about like people are not using the employment services as often, but um, I do I think that where we need to gather that data is from the PCPs. Um, because I don't know every single person who self-directs, but I can tell you that, if the PCP is accurately reflecting the person, if they are self-directing, it should say on there if they are employed or volunteering or so on. But we have had an increase in utilizing self-directed services, but there are also many people who do it without accessing services or they're just going through doors. So I just don't want to put like a blanket statement without everyone having that information. Um, and I think that's sufficient for today. But I do feel like we are in crisis and talking about like the vision and the mission statement. Like I think it's wonderful that you're seeing or you're trying to see a brighter future and being optimistic. It's just I feel like we're in like crisis mode and making sure that we can sustain having a DDA service over the next few years. That sometimes it is hard to see like the other side of the mountain. So, but it is always important to have you know the one person on the group who's like remembered that we have to have a solid foundation and mission to move forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments and your suggestion. Eric, I think we have time for perhaps a few comments in the chat.
We actually have one more, um,
Okay.
waiting patiently. Her name is Elizabeth.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Lopez. My son's in self-direction. I'm a support broker. I'm also wanted to comment on employment. Um, I dropped off a couple times if I'm repeating what other people said. I apologize. But one thing about self-direction, a lot of people are self-employed. So that wouldn't show up in the data necessarily. If they are getting supports, it's usually through community development services. And the other thing is that in order to access uh, ongoing job supports and follow along supports in self-direction, you have to be competitively employed. So with that, there are a lot of people who are probably employed, but they're not able to use, those codes, those services. And that's what I had to say. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you.
All right, Robert, you said you wanted to go to the chat.
Oh, I think we have time for one or two comments in the chat to share with the team before we move to adjournment.
Okay. This comment is from Jenny Griffin. Will rebracing include adjustments to the percentages applied to brick components? ERE and program supports are grossly underfunded.
The rebase review will include a review of the percentage assumptions used in the brick, and there is a possibility that the percentages will change for program support, ERE, transportation, general, et cetera.
Great question. One more, Eric.
This one is from Jessica Gallatin. Just a comment. When looking at raw data in reference to service utilization, especially employment, I would explore you all to consider the factors affecting the choice in model selection. Some participants in certain models like SDS.
It's good feedback.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. I would now like to turn it back over to Deputy Secretary Hutchinson to close out this cycle. Does not mean that there won't be work being done in between cycles. We have a lot of work, but it's worthwhile and exciting at the same time.
I just want to thank everybody again for your attendance and participation today, and not just today, but for this entire cycle all year. Can't stress more how important this group is to the DDA, understanding where the challenges are, understanding how we can better support our entire ecosystem. So I really want to thank you all for your participation, your feedback, and your ongoing commitment. You take a lot of time out of your busy schedules to be at the table with us as partners, and that does not go unnoticed. As we heard, we have a pretty lengthy laundry list that we came up with this afternoon for priorities that the department will take into consideration. And for those things that we mentioned that this is not the appropriate forum, we will make certain that we follow up on the employment comments at the Waiver Advisory Council. We'll also make certain that we follow up on the eligibility enrollment issues that the entire ecosystem is experiencing, not just on the waiver side, but on the state plan side, like pharmacy services and primary care services and so forth. I can't stress more the importance and the urgency and the department's attention to taking action to really address our system issues. So we'll be providing updates on eligibility and enrollment at the Waiver Advisory Council. There will be much more work being done outside of the adjournment of this rate review cycle. And so I want to thank everyone in advance for your work there. As you all heard, the GL template for 2025 is due October 31st. Please do not wait until the end of that time to submit your documents. We are here open, willing, and able to accept your template data ASAP and work through any challenges. We also want to strongly encourage you access every resource that the department has put before you, the Hilltop Institute, Optimus, as well as peer-to-peer. My team will be reaching out by way of our provider programs director, Ms. Nova Evans, to get to those smaller providers who may have more challenges than other providers. Because again, we really want quality data.
to set such important rates that um, uh, inform decisions, or I should say that set policy decisions that inform our rates. So thank you so very much for the work that you've done. Thank you so very much for your dedication to this effort. I know it's been a lot. And thank you so much for your partnership. More to come in the very near future.
Yeah, that concludes our session for today. Thank you for your support.